Luke chapter 19, we spent last week discussing primarily most of the class the Caesars in Rome, and I hope that wasn't a waste of time. I think maybe it was helpful to me and possibly was to some of the rest. We saw that there were probably about 4 of the Caesars that were named in the New Testament. And what we were attempting to do was to show that, what the New Testament describes here for us is recorded in actual history. And how the Lord used some of the Caesars to bring about his will. It was Claudius Caesar who decided when he got the job that all the world needed to be taxed. And of course that took Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem to fulfill the prophecy that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem and things like that. And so that was the purpose of our class last week. But what we want to notice this morning, we'll begin in verse 43. Jesus has made his way into the city of Jerusalem, or at least he's very close. Jesus is going to make a prophecy now in verses 43 and 44 concerning this the city of Jerusalem, or the citizens, the people that make up the city of Jerusalem. We saw it last week, that verse 41, that as he came close and he's looking at the city, he begins to weep over it, or weep over the people that live there. And he tells them, riding this donkey again, he's talking to himself or talking, out loud possibly, if you people could have known, even you at this time in your life, at least in this your day, if you could have figured out in the time that you had what you had. We know that the Lord had sent prophets and different people to speak to the nation of Israel. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 1 tells us that. But now at this time, God has sent his only Son. And Jesus is telling them, if you could have just figured out in your time what you had, what you have now, the peace that you could have and the prosperity you could have enjoyed. But he said, all that's hidden from you now. You closed your eyes to it. You'll never be able to see it. And so he begins his prophecy. Let's read verse 43 and 44 for the beginning part of our study this morning. Luke chapter 19, verse 43, Jesus here continues to speak. He says, For the day shall come upon you, Jerusalem, the citizens of Jerusalem, that your enemies, the Roman soldiers, are going to cast a trench about you. They're going to compass you round, and they're going to keep you in on every side. Verse 44, they're going to lay you even with the ground. He's talking about the physical city now. It's going to be completely destroyed. Your children that's within the city of Jerusalem, they're going to be destroyed. Men, women, and children. They shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because you knewest not the time of your visitation. But Jesus is telling these people, that the days are coming. And we just said last week that Jesus was about 32, 33 years old. This is in the last few days of his life on this earth. We're within 3 or 4 days of it. I don't know exactly what day this is, but, we saw from John chapter 12 and verse 1, he showed up in Bethany on the Mount of Olives, and John tells us there that it was 6 days before the Passover. And he's going into Jerusalem now the next day, so we're within at least 5 days. So he don't have long on this earth. He's 32, 33 years old. He's making this prophecy now about something that we know happened from history in the year 70 A.D. And I'm still using A.D. I don't want like that C.E. Common Era. I don't like that. Can't even remember it anyway. But notice what he tells these people. Y'all folks need to understand that your enemies, the Roman army, is going to dig a trench around you. They'll dig a trench. They're going to set up an embankment. It's not necessarily a trench for a what do you call it, a moat around a castle or something like that. Not necessarily that. But they're digging this trench. It's an embankment of dirt that they're going to use to protect themselves with. And of course, they do that. This embankment that they're going to dig around the city of Jerusalem is going to be completely around it. History tells us that the city of Jerusalem was some 39 furlongs around it. And we discussed here a few weeks ago that the furlong was 625 feet. If we got 39 of them, that equates out to 4.5 or 5 miles. That's a pretty good ditch. It's a pretty big ditch, to pile up some dirt that you can hide behind. A lot of digging going on there. But these people are going to be of Jerusalem. They're going to be kept in on every side. Nobody's going to escape. Notice, if you would, Luke chapter 21. Jesus here provides a little more description of what he's talking about here in Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 21, verses 5 and beginning in verse 5. Oh, 21, that's 20. Didn't look right. Luke chapter 21, verse 5. Jesus is leaving the temple here, and as some spake of the temple how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts, he said, as for these things, you behold, the days will come in which one stone, in the which there shall not be left one stone upon another, that shall not be thrown down. Verse 7, and they ask him, Matthew 24 says, he's talking about these apostles here. And they ask him, they're on the Mount of Olives, Master, but when shall these things be? And what sign shall there be when these things come? When is this going to happen? When are these things going to happen? We're in Luke chapter 21, fixing to go to verse 20. Luke chapter 21 and verse 20. Notice what Jesus tells these apostles now about when this happened. Verse 21. Did I say 20? No, 20. Verse 20. Luke 21 and verse 20. When you shall, when's this going to happen? When you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies. When you see the armies circling around Jerusalem there, then know that the desolation is close. It's imminent. Notice verse 21. Let them which are in Judea, out in the countryside there, flee to the mountains. And let them which are in the midst of Jerusalem get out. And let not them that are in the countries go into Jerusalem. We pointed out last week that Nero was the Caesar when this uprising in Israel began. And he said Vespasian and his son Titus in the year 66 AD. Jerusalem was started in 70 AD. He sent Vespasian and Titus his son. They went to Galilee. They didn't go directly to Jerusalem. They landed in Galilee with a large Roman army, and they began to put down the uprising, beginning in Galilee, Cana and Capernaum and Nazareth and all of those different places. And they made their way down to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was, of course, going to be the last stand, the last stronghold, if you will. But these people, these Jews up in Galilee, when they see what's happening, it's me, well, I'm running. I'm leaving here. I'm going to go across the river over here. I'm going to try to escape. The Jews in Jerusalem, when this uprising began, were able to run out the Roman garrison that was there in Jerusalem. It was a small army there just to keep the peace. There's an uprising over all the country. They were able to run out the Romans out of Jerusalem, put them out of the city. They set up their own government. We've got the nation of Israel back now. We've got our own government. We're here in the city of Jerusalem. People out in the countryside have heard that. Here comes the Romans. I'm headed to Jerusalem. I'll be safe there. Jesus is telling them, and I think here he specifically, in Luke chapter 21, I think he's talking to Christians here.
Don't go.
Don't know?
Don't go.
Oh, don't go. Yes,
Don't
don't go to Jerusalem. If you're in the countryside, go to the mountains. If you're in Jerusalem, get out. That's good advice. But if I'm in Jerusalem and I'm safe, we've got our own government here, Edgar. We're safe. We got our doors shut. We're safe. I'm a Christian, but my family's here. My job's here.
He makes a statement in Luke 21:8. See to it that you are not misled.
Okay. Yeah.
Jesus warns them.
Yeah.
Don't be lulled into your complacency. Don't be lulled into your false concept.
Yeah. But and what I was going to say, a lot of our, historians claim that there was not one Christian killed in the siege of Jerusalem. I find that hard to believe. I've read a couple or three of them that said not one Christian died. I don't know. I'm the type that I'm safe. I'm a Christian, but I'm staying here in Jerusalem. I'll be better off here in Jerusalem. I'm not. You can go, but I'm not going. You
You
should stay
still
here.
would have had, even Christians would have still had very close ties
Sure.
with Jerusalem and other Jews, family members
Yeah.
who haven't converted,
Yeah.
all those kinds of things. So I think the historian's idea is maybe just wishful thinking, not.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty, so we're going to say,
But
I think
also-
it's impossible
Me too. I didn't believe that.
to pinpoint whether or not there were Christians in Jerusalem.
We do not know
Me neither,
that.
I
I
agree.
think God's providence and care takes care of his own.
Yeah.
And
He's giving them what? This is to Christians, I think.
I think in this context, he's writing to Christians. He's warned them, and if they did leave, and God protects the Christian in ways that we may not understand.
Yes. Yes.
So I mean,
But I've got to seize the opportunity, huh?
you had to do your own thing. The destruction of Jerusalem in 1870, it was basically to finally and ultimately destroy the Jewish system.
Yes, and it did.
I mean, that was the purpose of it.
And it did.
And I think that was God's manifold plan. Is in AD 70, there will be no Jews. There will be no Judaizers.
For our discussion next week, before I forget to say this, we're going to talk about the temple a little bit toward the end of this last, or maybe next week. Is there a Jewish temple in Jerusalem today? Is there a Jewish temple in Jerusalem today?
There's something there because they are.
Yeah, but that's the mosque. That's the
Yeah.
Muslim mosque. That's what we're always fighting over.
They pray at the wall. There's a wall they pray at.
That's not the temple.
Yeah, but
This
it
is-
is a mosque. Yeah.
And I thought of that, and I looked around and looked and saw, and is there a temple in Jerusalem today since AD 70? Think about that for next week. We'll talk about that next week. That's just a sideline here. I'm chasing rabbits, Andy. Okay? Look it up. Is there a Jewish temple? If not, where they worship it? Or do they worship? What happened to all that? But anyway, let's go back to Luke chapter 19, where this is where we're studying. Luke chapter 19, verse 43. But the Jews who saw this Roman invasion coming from the north, from Galilee, they're running ahead. Bunches of them are going to Jerusalem. That's where I went too. They got, we got a locked gate down there. When the Roman army showed up and they began to dig this trench, and the people inside there, they're seeing, what are they doing? They decide, we need to do something defensive. We can't just let them. They're encircling us. They're going to starve us out, and that, of course, is what happened. But they starved. This took 7 months. This siege was 7 months long. Nobody went in. Nobody went out. There was no food went in. 7 months. After 7 months, I'd probably eat up everything in the house, including everything that was in the freezer. I've already eaten it all, and we're starving. But when they saw what was happening, some of them decided, well, we got to do something about this. They went outside to face the Roman army. Well, they were overwhelmed. They were no match for this Roman army. Those Jews were forced in the valley of Kidron, and they were slaughtered there. And that was the end of their defensive position. After that, everybody stayed inside. Ain't nobody leaving no more. Ain't nobody coming in. So what are they going to do? Notice verse 44. You wouldn't have any comment. Luke chapter 19, verse 44. This prophecy continues. This is the physical city of Jerusalem now. They're going to lay this city even with the ground. Your children that's within you, they're all going to be slain. They shall not leave in you one stone upon another, because you knew it's not the time of your visitation. There ain't going to be nothing left. Nothing. The destruction is going to be total. Not one stone left upon another. Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 15 tells us that that's the way the temple was built. One stone laid upon another. And that's the way it's going to be torn down. Even the children. History records that, after 7 months they've eaten up all the food. all we got is our children, and you know, this is gross and graphic, but they begin to eat their own children. I'm hungry. The child will be better off, won't he? Well, there's all kind of excuses, but you know, you get desperate when you get hungry. But you know, whatever children were left, they were killed. Every man, woman is going to die in their children. Nobody's going to be spared. And after 7 months of this siege, Jerusalem finally fell. You know, after the 7 months, those people are so sick and weak and tired and dead in there. There's a lot of people already dead in there. The Roman army didn't have any trouble breaching the wall and going over top.
Just think about the Christians who escaped all this,
Mm-hmm.
and how much of a relief
Mhm.
they had to feel,
Yeah.
knowing that they could have been part of that, but because of their faith in Jesus and God, their obedience,
Mm-hmm.
they were not in Jerusalem when this happened.
Yeah.
And then transversely, think about the terror that is on these people's minds and hearts, having to eat their own children to stay
Yeah.
alive,
Yeah.
just inching for life. And that is the exact comparison between obeying God today and a life in Christ and a life in the world.
Okay.
It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah.
The same decision that we have to make. A decision of peace and safety and comfort,
Mm-hmm.
or a decision of destruction.
Just parallel. Absolutely. And it's pretty much that same thing. It's that desperate when you come down to the wire. It's going to be just like that. You know. But you know, it was estimated that over 1 million people were either had died or were slaughtered finally within the city walls of Jerusalem. Over 1 million. And that's people who went in there. I don't think Jerusalem was that large to begin with, but they took in all the refugees, and over 1 million. There was over 100,000 people that were killed when the campaign started way back up in Galilee. This is a pretty brutal thing that the Roman army, they came to put down this rebellion, and they put it down. And the ultimate thing was to destroy Jerusalem and destroy this temple. And we'll scatter them Jews from here to everywhere, and we won't be bothered with them no more. They will regret the day that they rose up against Nero back in Rome. For next week also, talking about the temple. What temple is this? Ain't Solomon's temple, of course. How many temples were there?
3, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah. 3. Sorry?
One of the reasons, of course, it was prophesied about the stone being all tore out. It was because the Roman army was looking for gold in these stones and places. That's why it was really
Okay.
a lot was tore down.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know nothing about the prophecy of the stones.
Oh, no.
But they tore these stones down looking for gold and treasure and things.
Okay. That's very possible. We mentioned last week that Titus, the son who was left there to carry out this destruction of Jerusalem, after the temple was destroyed, he gathered up all the gold, the silver, the vessels, and whatever it was in there and took it back to Rome. And they finished building the Colosseum with what they got, you know, what they could get out of this gold and silver. You know, they used it to their advantage. And all that's gone, of course. All the stuff that was in the temple for years and years and hundreds of years, that's all gone now,
Yeah,
as well as the temple. Go ahead.
And that was a siege to the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation, after it failed, there's no more such thing as a Jewish nation.
Right.
We know that we hear people say the Jews and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
but back then they could trace their ancestors back pretty far back.
Yes.
But after after God destroyed the Jewish nation, they didn't know where they came from, actually, who the people was.
Right. That's true. You know, even after they came back out of the Babylonian captivity for 70 years, and they're rebuilding the temple there in Jerusalem, a lot of people showed up and say, you know, well, I'm a Jew, I'm here to help, and they couldn't find me recorded anywhere, and so they'd say, well, no, you're not part of us, we don't need your help. But there was a lot of confusion over who's who anymore. You know, I guess maybe they had some kind of a record, but they didn't have a complete record. And so after this one, of course, there is no record anymore of the Jewish nation as they knew it back then. Notice the conclusion of verse 44. All this is going to happen, the conclusion of verse 44, because you knew not the time of your visitation. Because you didn't know the time of your visitation. You know, if you look back at verse 42, Jesus tells them, talking to them, to himself, if you had known, even you, at least in this your time, in your day, if you could have figured out what you could have had. And now all this is going to happen because you didn't know the time of your visitation. What visitation? You know, in our Wednesday night class, and Obadiah, the last verse there tells something about the kingdom of the Lord, and he's talking about the destruction of the nation of Edom. And he's talking about, you know, the saints are coming and they're going to preach the word of the Lord, and you know. We discussed, is he talking about the end time for Edom, or is he talking about the judgment times for us? We don't know. We don't know. Either one will apply. And I think that's true here. What visitation is he talking about here now? Talking about the Roman army, the time that they're going to come. Talking about this time that the Lord has sent his Son among them to visit with them, to be among them. Andy, go ahead.
I think the most obvious application of this is these Jews had rejected the Christ. They rejected the day that God sent them. When God came to visit with the Jews through Christ, they rejected him.
Yes.
And I think that's a direct application of this. In the context of what he's saying is, here you have Jesus. He rode into your city. 35 years later, he's destroyed.
Yeah.
You should accept him 35 years ago.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that's what it is.
That's a direct context of what he's talking about.
Yeah. But you know, we could say this is the visitation of the Roman army, and that could be it too. If you'd have known about this that's coming, and I tried to tell you, but no, you didn't pay that no mind. But notice Luke chapter 1.
But, you know,
Go ahead.
Even if it goes back to the fact that there was no Christians destroying the destruction of Jerusalem, it didn't even fit more. He's telling these people here, look, Christians were saved, you wasn't.
Yeah.
You know.
That could be. But I still question that about not one Christian died. I find it hard to believe. Luke chapter 1, verse 67, we find that this is the account of the birth of John the Baptist and his daddy Zechariah now prophesying. Luke chapter 1, verse 67, and his father, John the Baptist's father, Zechariah, was filled with the Holy Ghost and prophesied, saying, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he has visited and he has redeemed his people. He's not talking about his son John the Baptist that was just born. He's talking about the coming Messiah. John the Baptist, his son's going to be the forerunner. Now notice verse 69. He's raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began. And we're going to be saved from our enemies and from the hand of those that hate us. The Lord is going to visit his people. And he's going to save them from the hands of his enemies. He's going to save them from the folks that hate them. You know, Jesus here is telling these folks, if you could have known the time of this visitation, if you could just, if you're going back and forth, if you could have even known, at least in your days that you're living, who's here among you? God sent all these prophets, and you murdered every one of them. He sent his son. You murdered, you rejected him. You're going to murder him. If you could just figure it out what you had, but you never did understand that. And so as a result of all that, all this is going to come upon you. Anyone have anything to say? Go ahead.
There's a doctrine being taught today for a long time, what they call the AD 70 doctrine.
Okay.
Yeah. They believe that's when, if I understand it right, they believe that was when the second coming of Christ was, I believe. I might be wrong on that. But in this AD 70, people preaches.
Okay.
Christ has already visited.
I've got to look at that. I don't know.
That's exactly what they believe. It's taken over several congregations that we've known where men have kind of crept in, if you will, and have started teaching this doctrine that he's talking about.
Yeah.
And it is the idea that this destruction of the temple was Jesus' second coming. But just like all false prophets, they lack the ability to be able to tell you, well, so if Jesus already came back,
Who's
like,
coming again?
well, no, he's not coming again. He came back. What are we doing then?
Let's go home.
If Jesus came back, took all his, all the people with him, what are we doing here? And why are we wasting our time showing up on Sunday morning worshiping something that already took place? So
That's the same thing that you have with the premillennial theory.
yeah, it's an empty doctrine
Okay, but
that lacks answers to.
Jesus, as he rode this young donkey into Jerusalem, that's just
No.
That's
Jesus came back in AD 70, the destruction of the temple.
Okay.
And that was his second coming. That was when he came and made his judgment on earth.
On the house of Israel.
Yes. And so it's over with. The second coming, we missed it.
So what are we doing?
Exactly. That's the question. So what are we doing?
I don't know.
There's no answer for it. So it tells you, it's really quick to figure out, hey, there's no way that's accurate.
Well, yeah, let's go.
Let's go home.
Why?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I'd heard that, but I'm not familiar with it. No, that doesn't even make sense to me. I will look that up.
It was really prevalent for a while.
If you have time one day, look
Sorry?
up that AD 70.
Yeah, I am. I never thought about
Yes.
that. I'd like to know a little bit about it. Yeah, okay, I'll do that.
It's being taught.
Yeah,
Even
it certainly is. I've heard
preachers
about
are
it.
preaching it.
Yeah. Do you think these people were surprised when the army, the Roman army's coming?
No.
Well, I mean, they've had their uprising and they're pretty much in control over the whole country. Nero sent them in 66 AD to Galilee. Were they surprised when this big army is showing up? I mean,
That's the same thing Edom was doing with Jerusalem.
Yeah.
When they were being slaughtered and cast out of their cities, they were going in and taking what was left and killing the fugitives.
yeah,
And I'm sure in their mind, to some extent, they thought, hey, we finally got rid of them Jews.
yeah.
Look at us. And then God comes out and places judgment against them.
Okay. But let's bring this down to me and us today. Will we be surprised when the Lord comes again?
Shouldn't be.
We shouldn't be.
Because we're to look and hasten for the day that's coming.
Yes, we have, and I believe I do that. But Andy, I've noticed about me, 2 or 3 days have passed by, and I never even thought about, the Lord may come today. I really. It occurs to me 2 or 3 days later, where was your mind? Would I be surprised? Yes. Yes,
Caught
because,
off guard, maybe.
sir,
Caught off guard, but
caught off guard. I know he's coming. I look forward to his coming. This today, thank the Lord. Linda, sometimes there are 2 or 3 passages that I don't consider that. And one of those days, would I be surprised? Yeah, I would be surprised. Be surprised at myself that where was your mind? And we get that. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10 tells us, the day of the Lord is coming as a thief in the night. Would I be surprised last night if a thief showed up at our house? That's absolutely I would have been. Never had any problems at the house. If it ever disappeared in the night or the day. Knock on
would
wood.
you have been ready?
Sir?
Would you have been ready?
Thief showing up at last night? No, I wasn't ready. I was sound asleep. I've been surprised. He's standing there in the bedroom looking at me. I'd be very surprised. I'd probably forget where the pistol was. Wonder is it loaded now or not? Sir, go ahead.
Christ is coming so quick, it just be like a blink in the eye.
Yeah.
You can blink your eye 1 minute and you'll be gone the next.
That's it. And I think, knowing, I'd be surprised, but I shouldn't be. No, I shouldn't be. But, that's just the way we come as human. Notice 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Make a little application for us today. For 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, the first 2 verses, notice this. But the times of the season, brethren, you have no need that I write to you. I know this stuff, Linda. He don't need to tell me this, but he's going to go ahead and tell me, because you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord is coming as a thief in the night. I know that. I don't need him to tell me that. But notice the next verse. Well, when folks shall say, well, peace and safety. But then sudden destruction comes on them, as travail, as labor upon a woman with child, and they're not going to escape. I'll be surprised. Things are going good. We live very comfortably. Things are good. You know, I forget from a couple of days at a time that, you know, the Lord may come today, and wonderful. But if He came yesterday at 10:30 in the morning, I probably wasn't thinking about the Lord coming. Not even considered it all day long. So will I be surprised? Yeah. I don't need to be like these other folks. Notice verse 4, but you, brethren, you're not in darkness, that the day is going to overtake you as a thief. But you're children of the light, and that you're children of the day. You're not of the night, nor of the darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as do others, but let's watch and be sober. And,
I don't think you'll have time to be surprised.
well, probably not. Probably not.
In the twinkling of an eye. Well, what is it, twinkling of an eye?
Yeah.
You won't be surprised. You'll just be wherever you're going to be.
Well, probably so, and that might be good.
You better be ready for it. That's the whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to be prepared.
Absolutely. But I need to keep that in my mind, I think, that, you know, I don't want to be surprised. I want to look for the Lord coming every day and hasten His coming. Pray for the Lord to come. But sometimes we forget about those things, and we get a little lax, and, you know, these people, I think they were warned, and we've been warned. But how much am I preparing for it? I go about my little life every day. Sometimes I forget about what's important for us. You know, we have God's grace today. Are we aware of that? We know that. We have God's grace. Are we fully aware that we're going to be saved by our faith through God's grace? Do we fully know that the accepted time of salvation is today? 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 2. This is the accepted time. But Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 3, they ask us the question, will we escape if we neglect that salvation? Let's go about my little life.
We won't escape it.
No, we won't escape it. No more than these folks did, trapped in the walls of the city of Jerusalem. No, we won't escape. There will be no going in, no coming out. We're going to be totally surrounded. If I could just realize what I have in my day, what I possess in my day, and be prepared for that, and be thankful for that, and do all that I can to be an humble servant of the Lord, whatever that might be, but live every day that way. Maybe I would be prepared that way, but sometimes we get so busy with our lives, and you know, we just don't just give a whole lot of attention to it, maybe as we should. But maybe it's just me. I hope so. Anyone have any comment? Going back to Luke chapter 19, notice here, we're going to change gears now. Verse 45. Jesus went into the temple, and He began to cast out them that sold therein, and those that bought. Jesus, when He gets to Jerusalem, He went straight to the temple. I thought He was going to coronate a king. People thought they were going to crown a king. Why didn't He go to Pilate's palace? That's the seat of authority. Jesus went straight to the temple. Was the temple important to Him?
Why wouldn't he?
Sometimes I don't go straight to the church building, Amy, but it just ain't that important to me. But you're right.
Where do you expect to find Jesus in Jerusalem?
At the temple.
At the temple.
We're going to see that He taught at the temple every day.
Because what He
Every
said
day.
was, He said, "My house shall not be called." Notice the possession of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is that? What is the temple? It's the abode place of God.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you expect to find God in the temple?
In the temple. Okay.
When He got there, He didn't find what He liked. He didn't like what He found.
He didn't like what He found. Wow. Yeah. Notice Mark chapter 11. There's a little discrepancy, not much. It's basically the same thing. Mark chapter 11. Mark's account of this, verse 11. Mark 11, verse 11. Jesus entered into Jerusalem, and He went to the temple, and when He had looked around about upon all things, and now was eventide was coming, He went unto Bethany with the 12. He went to Jerusalem, He went to the temple, He looks around, get late in the evening, I'm going back across to across the valley of Kidron to the Mount of Olives, to Bethany. Notice verse 15, and they come to Jerusalem, and Jesus went into the temple. This is the next day now. And Jesus went into the temple and began to cast them out that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and seats of them that sold doves. Mark says that he went there and looked around and went and spent the night in Bethany. Luke says that he went there and he threw the money changers out immediately when he was there that day, apparently, or at least that's what I got from it. But at any rate, he went to the temple and he threw out, he cleansed the temple. That's what we like to call it today. How many times did Jesus cleanse the temple? Just the only time? Andy's holding up two fingers. That's the victory. Holding up two fingers, Andy. Notice John chapter 2. John chapter 2. John here records another very similar incident. Is it the same incident? No, it can't be. John chapter 2. What notice verse 1? The third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, and both Jesus was called and disciples of the marriage. This is where Jesus turned the water into wine. This is his first recorded miracle, when Jesus turned water into wine. Notice verse 11. This beginning of miracles, when we turned water into wine. This beginning of miracle to Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested or showed forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. Notice verse 12. After this, he went down to Capernaum. Cana's in Galilee. They just said they had to put them out up there, but it doesn't matter. After this, he went to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brethren and his disciples, and they continued there not many days. They didn't stay long in Capernaum. Notice why, verse 13, the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went to Jerusalem after the marriage feast in Cana. The first miracle that he did. This is the beginning of his ministry. Notice verse 14. He's going to the Jews' Passover in Jerusalem, and there he found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the changers of money sitting by. And when he made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables, and said to them, take these things hence, make not my Father's house a house of merchandise. This was another time. This was at the beginning of his ministry. Have you noticed from that, Jesus began his ministry with cleansing the temple. Jesus finished his ministry with cleansing the temple.
I wonder how many of those in the second time remembered the first time.
How many years?
Yeah, it been just a few years.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years. 2 or 3 years, they're already back. He ran, that guy ran us out. Let's go back. It didn't take me 2 or 3 years to get back, But, is the temple important to Jesus? He cleansed it at the beginning of his ministry. He cleansed it at the end of his ministry. This is God's house. This is important. How important is God's house to us?
What is the temple of God today?
The temple of God today is us. How important? Jesus cleansed it at his start. He cleansed it at his conclusion. It's important. Is it important to me? How much attention do I pay to it? Within my own hands, I possess my own soul. If I could know today what I have, but I've got things to do and I'm busy and I just, okay. We need to understand what we have today, because I may not have it tomorrow, just like all these other folks. Anyone have anything to say? Go ahead.
See how people are back then, and they was the temple. They was using it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
Okay, they thought they was doing right.
Yes, it is.
Now you turn to Acts, the 21st chapter, when Paul took the poor Greek people into the temple.
Uh-huh.
They accused Paul of polluting the temple there, see.
Yes.
One place they uphold it, the next place they opposed it.
Okay.
2 different reasons there.
Yeah.
So
That's true. I never thought about
they
that.
took Paul and drug him out of the temple and beat him.
Yeah.
And of course, Scripture goes on.
They thought he took some Gentiles into the temple. He had not.
Paul was the polluting the temple.
Yeah, he was polluting the temple.
Used it for the wrong reason.
But here I am, I've got my sheep and my goats and my oxen right here. Kyle, I've got a thriving business still. You know, you gotta make a living.
It's important.
Edgar?
I've been on down there to 21 or 22. The Jews didn't realize that he was talking about, there's two different temples. He was talking about, well, I understand. But he said, if we destroy this temple in 3 days, I'll raise it up. The Jews thought he was talking about a building.
Yes.
He said it took him 46 years to build that temple.
Yeah.
But he was talking about his
Himself, his body, yeah.
Was raised.
And it would be raised up in 3 days. Yeah, that's right. I forgot to throw that in there, Edgar. Yeah. But, you know, well, where did these folks get the idea that it'd be okay to do this?
Convenience.
Sir?
It was convenience.
It's convenient. But notice, well, we're out of time. Notice next week, you got a lot to remember for next week. Now, Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 22 through 26. The Lord had made provision for folks that lived a long way from the temple. We're here in rural Leesville, and we got to take all of our tenth of our stuff to Los Angeles, California. And we ain't gonna load it on a train. We got to herd our sheep and our oxen all the way to Los Angeles. Well, we can't.
How much is Bible to get there?
Well, it'll take me, we're gonna do that annually. By the time I get back, it's time to start again. And so he made a provision for that, for the folks who had to go a long ways. Notice Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 23 through 26, what that provision was. And I think that's where it gave these folks the idea, the license that, you know, how do you say the word? Entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur. That's the reason I'm not one. I can't say it. But, you know, these folks, I've got a good idea. Here's a good business venture for me. People are coming every year. And I'm going to get there 2 months ahead of time. I'm going to stake out my area. And bring all my sheep and my goats, and I'm going to sell them suckers. You know? So, but anyway, they got the wrong idea. That wasn't the purpose of that. But, you know, we sort of twist it around and make it for my convenience, and especially if I'm going to make a profit at it. You know. Anyone have any question, comment? What, Andy? You look like you wanted to say
I was
something.
answering Linda.
Oh. So we don't have a private conversation during the class.
Sorry.
I've enjoyed this class. Thank you for your help.